Hey, what's up guys, Bajheera here. Now for this video, it's going to be the long-awaited patch 7.1.5 Fury Warrior PvP guide. Now, it's taken a little bit of time for me to get this video out for you guys, and I do apologize about that, but the reason for it is I hadn't been playing that much Fury. I'd been playing mostly ARMS, and I do plan on making an ARMS guide as well, but I've really been enjoying Fury, and I wanted to actually give myself a chance to play it at a high level so I can provide a guide for you guys that is actually helpful and allows you to close out this PvP season strong. So, without further ado, let's get to it. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at your abilities, both rotational abilities, offensive CDs, defensive CDs, as well as your PvP talents, your normal talents, and your artifact abilities, all of which will give us a pretty solid understanding of what it is Fury Warriors can do and what makes them effective. We're also going to be taking a look at your macros, your actual rotation, and then at the very end we're going to be looking at some situations that will set you up for success in PvP for 3v3 Arena and otherwise. First off, let's take a look at Fury Warriors' basic abilities. And of course, if you guys have played Fury before, you guys will already know these abilities, but we're going to take just a quick look at your rotational abilities to understand what they do and sort of how they fit into the specs. So Bloodthirst is going to be one of those abilities that you're going to want to hit off cooldown. It does a fair amount of damage. If it crits, it enrages you, which is a huge part of Fury Warrior, and it heals you a little bit. Raging Blow is another one of those rotational abilities that you're pretty much going to want to press off cooldown, especially if you're enraged. Now, the ability on here does say that it's only usable when you're enraged, but when we look at our talents, we're going to see that it's actually just becomes a rotational ability that deals really high chunk damage. Whirlwind is a way to not only do AoE damage, but also make things like Bloodthirst and Rampage deal additional cleave damage. Doesn't cost any rage, so it's a fun ability to spam. Probably not ideal for your DPS rotation to spam it in PvP, but it can be a lot of fun. Rampage is a very strong melee attack. It's kind of like a multi-phase attack. It hits multiple times with the ladder attacks hitting the hardest. And it does automatically deal damage as if you were in rage and enrages you. So this is going to take a lot of rage, but it's going to be a core part of the way that you deal damage as a Fury Warrior. Furious Slash is a very small damaging ability. It's one of those abilities that you're going to want to use as like a single target filler, although it does have the advantage of making your next Bloodthirst more likely to crit. And this effect continues to stack up until either the buff falls off or until your Bloodthirst crits. So if you use Furious Slash a couple times, Bloodthirst doesn't crit. If you throw another Furious Slash to keep your stacks up, and then you can use Bloodthirst again to have an even more increased chance to crit. So a little ability that you probably won't use a ton, but it does have its usefulness. And Enrage, not an ability, but a passive to your class where Enrage causes you to not only attack more quickly, but also makes you deal a lot more damage. And that's one of those things that we're going to try to make the most use of to deal the most damage in general. All right, let's go through our abilities quickly. Some of these will be abilities unlocked by talents, but if I have them, it's because they're things that I probably use often and make a decision to talent for. And we'll go over talents in just a moment. So the first thing on the list, Avatar. Offensive cooldown is unlocked by talents, makes you deal 20% extra damage. A really solid pick. Pretty much always going to be part of my toolkit, always going to be my talent choice. Battle Cry, your big offensive cooldown. Let loose a Battle Cry granting 100% increased crit strike chance, so guaranteed crits on everything for usually not 7 seconds. Usually it's 5 seconds, but I have a talent that makes it 7 seconds, which is on a 50-second cooldown. Really, really nice. Pretty much your bread and butter offensive ability. Zerka Rage is a CC break on 1 minute cooldown, gets you out of fear, sap, and incapacitate effects, so it's just a CC breaker for you. Bloodthirst, we already talked about this. Generates rage, deals a little bit of damage, heals you, really, really nice. Charge is your gap closer. Commanding Shout is a 3 minute cooldown, but we'll talk about this later in talents. You can also make it a 1 minute cooldown, which grants you your party members within 30 yards 15% maximum health for 10 seconds. So it's a nice way to save your teammates. Like if they're really, really low health, you throw them a rallying cry, buy you just a little bit more time, a little bit of health to survive, and hopefully, you know, get out of that sticky situation. Enraged Regen, another defensive cooldown. Commanding Shout and Enraged Regen, I probably still call this Rallying Cry, and Enraged Regen are your two main defensive cooldowns. Enraged Regen reduces damage taken by 30%, and then it also makes a Bloodthirst restore an additional 20% health. So you're going to want to use this whenever you're low health, your healer's in CC, something like that. You can heal yourself big time with Bloodthirst. And we'll also go over in talents ways to make this talent really, really keep you alive in rough situations. Execute, obviously a warrior classic. Unfortunately, not always the best choice of button to press because it's like the one ability besides Rampage that actually uses Rage as a Fury Warrior, and you want to keep those Rampages rolling. But if somebody's really, really low and you need that kill, sometimes using Execute's worth it. It deals a fair amount of damage, and it's only usable on enemies that have 20% health or less. So Execute, not quite guaranteed finisher, but sometimes you got to use it. I already mentioned Furious Slash Heroic Leap is one of your mobility cooldowns. You can leap, almost 40 yards away. Does a little bit of damage when you land, and depending on this is actually an ability that we're going to talk a lot about in terms of talents, in terms of how you want to use that for increasing your mobility. Heroic Throw deals a tiny little bit amount of damage, but sometimes they're able to keep people in combat, stop drinks, even kill totems sometimes if they have very, very low health, but just kind of one of those small little ranged abilities you're going to be checking out that has a little bit of a niche usefulness. Intimidating Shout is your one baseline CC besides Charge Root and Piercing Howl we'll talk about in a second. But this is one of those things that you're going to be using to set up CC with your team. A lot of times my CC setup, I only really have two CCs, is Intimidating Shout and whatever stun I choose, which is usually Stormbolt, as we'll mention in a moment. But it fears everybody within 8 yards. Pretty nice. Odin's Fury, huge offensive cooldown with, this comes from your artifact weapon, does a ton of AoE fire damage and applies a dot. So when we talk about our rotation, we're going to be talking about how to make the absolute most out of Odin's Fury. And I think we'll probably talk a little bit about artifact weapon as well. Piercing Howl is your AoE slow. Is on global cooldown, but it's also AoE, so it's actually pretty nice. I like Piercing Howl a lot more than Hamstring, for obvious reasons. But this is kind of one of your like soft CC. It's just a slow. Pummel, obviously this is how you interrupt casts. Raging Blow, we already talked about that, deals a ton of damage. When you talent it, as we'll talk about in a moment, does even more damage and just becomes a rotational ability. Rampage, huge important ability for Fury Warriors in terms of the damage you're dealing, but also in terms of getting your enrage up. Stormbolt, just part of your stun rotation if you decide to take that talent. Taunt is actually kind of nice for still lining up shockwaves and things like that, but a lot of times you're not going to be using it outside of just pulling pets off of your partners, or like I said, if you want to use it in a cool way, if you're fighting like a hunter and somebody else and they're both close to you, you can taunt their pet over, or I guess any class with a pet, you can taunt their pet over for a nice triple shockwave. Whirlwind, talked about that. A little bit of AoE, also makes your abilities cleave. Enrage, obviously, huge aspect of Fury Warriors. Being enraged makes you deal more damage, generate more rage, which allows you to deal more damage. It's just, it's a nice sort of feedback loop there. And of course, related to your enrage is your mastery, which makes you deal a certain amount more damage while enraged. And of course, it won't be a full 43% because in PvP you have a stat template, and it's probably more around like 22% or something like that. But it's still really nice, and that extra damage definitely adds up. And of course, you have Titan's Grip, which allows you to dual wield two-handed weapons, but also gives you an increased maximum 15% health, which is really, really nice because as Fury, you do take extra damage while you're enraged, but you also heal based off of your max health. So having the extra health makes a big difference. All right, so now let's get right into the talents. Now keep in mind that the talents that I'm using are pretty much the talents that I think are helpful. You guys are more than welcome to switch up your playstyle and your talents to whatever you want, but a lot of times when I'm doing PvP, especially Arena, the talents that I choose fall into two basic specializations. One focused on healing and one focused on mobility, and those make use of honor talents as well, so we'll be looking at those in just a moment. Alright, so starting off is Endless Rage. This is not a talent that I change around very much. Auto attacks generate 30% additional rage. Really, really nice. Now, these are talents that may change a little bit depending on what you're doing. Obviously, if you're in BGs and you want to have an AoE stun, Shockwave's really, really nice. Stormbolt is a very reliable single target stun, a little bit longer duration, and Double Time is saying, I don't need stuns, but I want to be able to chase people down with 2 charges. That is completely up to you. A lot of times I'm using Stormbolt. Reliable stun helps your team either set up CC or set up kills. This is what I'm using basically all the time. Same thing with Avatar. These are other fun talents that you guys can definitely try out if you want to. I am pretty much always using Avatar. Stacking that increased 20% damage and I guess knocking yourself out of root effects is really, really nice. Definitely recommend Avatar. I hardly ever change this talent for actual competitive PvP. But I understand in BG, sometimes it's fun to try other things out. But Avatar is my solid choice. Now, here's where the specializations sort of vary. Furious Charge causes your next Bloodthirst to heal you by an additional 300% after you charge. So that is a huge heal, even if you're not under the effects of Enraged Regen. Really, really nice talent to use for pretty much more passive healing during the arena match. You're going to be doing a fair amount of charging and bloodthirsting naturally as part of your just combat rotation, so you can expect to have some nice healing from the Furious Charge talent. But it's this talent tier where the big differences are going to occur between specialization focused more on healing and a specialization or a talent choice focused on mobility, because here you have your choice of Bounding Stride, which reduces the cooldown on Heroic Leap by 15 seconds and makes you run faster for 3 seconds after finishing your leap. So this talent synergizes really nicely with one of your PvP talents called Barbarian, which increases the number of charges for Heroic Leap by 2 and increases the damage done. But Heroic Leap doesn't really do that much damage in general, but the main thing is you're going to be taking Barbarian and Bounding Stride together to give you basically 3 leaps on a 30-second cooldown, each one that gives you a sprint afterwards. So that's really, really nice for the mobility aspect of that build. So this is the one major variation that's actually going to occur. I pretty much keep all of my other talents very, very similar whenever I'm doing PvP. Then another one on the next line, and we'll get back to the way things change once we look at honor talents, but this one, Frothing Berserker, 15% increased damage when you reach 100 rage. It sounds like it might be a little bit annoying to have to reach 100 rage before you actually deal damage, but the way that Fury does deal damage is it's really pretty much all burst. I mean, your damage can get consistently pretty scary, like without a doubt, but the burst damage is what really anchors it all. And Frothing Berserker giving you an extra 15% damage, and I mean, the movement speed increase is also really, really nice. Don't count that out by any means, but I think Massacre and Carnage, they're kind of fun. Like, once again, every talent, test it out and have fun with it in BGs. But if you're trying to really get serious about Fury Warrior PvP, Frothing Berserker is my solid recommendation. Same thing for this next talent tier. I think that some of these talents can be fun. Bloodbath Frenzy could be fun in BGs. But Inner Rage is pretty much the talent I'm always using as Fury. Like I mentioned earlier, it takes Raging Blow, and instead of making it an Enrage ability that you can only use when enraged, Raging Blow is just a sort of rotational ability that you can press whenever it's off cooldown. 4.5-second cooldown, not a huge deal. Whenever you have any sort of haste, that's also going to affect that. So I'm in my PvP gear right now. I do not have that much haste. I have 11% haste. That's probably about what you have in PvP anyway. And it's on a 4.07-second cooldown. So not that big of a deal. But the damage that it does deal is quite significant. So what you're going to want to do with an Inner Rage a lot of times is, we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go into rotation, but you're going to use this even when you're not enraged, but a lot of times you're going to try to pull to 100 rage, rampage, and then use your Raging Blow right after for a huge chunk of damage. So that's a really, really nice thing to do. And then as the last talent tier, same thing. These can be fun in BGs. Try them out if you want to, but Reckless Abandon is my solid recommendation, especially because of the way that it pairs with Frothing Berserker. Reckless Abandon, Battle Cry lasts 2 seconds longer and generates 100 rage. So every time you press your Battle Cry, you are going to be benefiting from Frothing Berserker. And keep in mind, as a Fury Warrior, whenever you're in Battle Cry, you deal increased damage anyway. Increased critical damage, but I mean, all of your special abilities are going to be critting as a result of Battle Cry. So you got to keep in mind that you're going to be doing that much more damage from Battle Cry, and you're also going to be enraged. Let's see, okay, there's Rampage damage. Where's my Enraged talent, where you deal more damage when you're enraged? There you go. So you're going to be dealing even more damage while enraged. So all those cooldowns together, especially if you use Frothing Berserker and if you use Rampage, it's just going to be dealing an insane amount of damage during your burst window, and that's exactly what we're looking for. So keep that in mind. And once again, I will be going over rotation a little bit as well, but before things get too complicated, I start whipping out my artifact weapon and scrolling through all these talents. Just understand that that's the setup that I'm looking for when it's basically healing is Furious Charge, mobility is Bounding Stride. Keep that in mind as we look at our PvP talents next. All right, now for PvP talents. On my Horde character, I play an Orc, and Relentless goes really, really well with Orcs just because you get passive stun reduction from being an Orc, and then you also have all CC reduction from Relentless, which makes stuns really, really short on you, but you also have just reduced CC duration in general. And as a warrior, you can expect to be CC'd a lot, so reducing all of that CC by a little bit sometimes feels better than trying to get out of one CC and then having to wait for a cooldown of that. That being said, adaptation and even the medallion have its usefulness, but a lot of times I'm using Relentless as an Orc. For a lot of situations, reinforced armor is a safe pick. If you're fighting things that only deal physical melee damage, then sparring is a great option. But a lot of times, reinforced armor is good against a mix of a caster DPS, or like caster melee, or obviously double caster. Reinforced armor is good. I don't often use hardiness, but one of these two situationally is a pretty good pick. Against things that would be annoyed by disarm, like things that deal physical damage or things like that require a melee weapon to deal damage, disarm is a great option. Against things that don't, death sentence is my choice over death row. I feel like having a charge execute is way more useful than having execute usable at an additional 5% of their health. This is completely up to you. This doesn't really factor into a Fury specific situation. This is just basically warriors. If you don't have anything to disarm, death sentence. If you can disarm and it'll make a difference, then go ahead and use it. Same thing with this decision-making process. If you have things that are going to be casted on you a lot, Spell Reflection may be an option that you want to go for. If not, I actually think Master and Commander is more useful than Rage Machine. I'd rather be able to have another defensive cooldown for my team than generate more rage, especially in the situation of Master and Commander is going to be benefiting all of your team, whereas Rage Machine is only going to benefit you. So even if you're getting hit, great. Rage Machine is helpful for you, but Master and Commander is too. If you're not getting attacked, Rage Machine isn't going to do anything for you, but you could save your teammate with an extra rallying cry when it's only on a 1 minute cooldown. So I think that if you're fighting like a melee cleave, Master and Commander is probably better than Spell Reflection. But if you're fighting casters, Spell Reflection is obviously a good choice. So here is where you make another decision that actually affects your specialization. So if you're going for the healing build, where you want, but you don't have to make. I think they do synergize, but you can also pick and choose between the two of them. I think these two talents and these two talents are really what define your spec as a Fury warrior. So Battle Trance is a really, really nice talent. After you use Raging Blow on the same target twice, you go into a trance, causing you to regen 3% of your health and generate 5 rage every 3 seconds for 12 seconds. So if you're training a target, Battle Trance is going to give you a lot of passive healing and a lot of passive rage generation, which is really, really nice as a Fury warrior. You love having health back because you do take extra damage when you're enraged, but also generating more rage is going to mean that you can keep that full rage, rampage, raging blow combo rolling. Really, really nice. However, Barbarian, if you're not getting hit at all, or you anticipate not being attacked and you can use the extra mobility, then Barbarian is also really, really nice. Consequently, if your healer has mobility, then Barbarian sometimes can actually save you more than the passive healing of Battle Trance will, because you can actually just leap away. That's been really, really helpful. So against like RMD, things like that, where one, I'm going to want to be attacking a mage a lot even though he has a lot of mobility, and if I ever get attacked, I can just run away. Barbarian is super nice when paired with Bounding Stride for that purpose. So keep those talents in mind. Choose whether you want healing or mobility, and make those talent choices accordingly. Thirst for Battle is really fun, although I don't use it that much in Arena. You can, though. There are situations where you're only going to be slowed, and clearing a slow with Bloodthirst could be really, really helpful. So that's another talent to consider, but a lot of times my decisions are between Battle Trance and Barbarian, depending on whether I want passive healing and rage generation or extra heroic leaps. All right, so our last talent tier is Slaughterhouse, Endless Rage, Death Wish. Death Wish is kind of funny for Battlegrounds. Never would use it in Arena. I don't think it's worth it, but some people could definitely prove me wrong. They could go in there and destroy people with Death Wish, and that'd be hilarious, but I'm going to play it safe and probably go mostly with Slaughterhouse, which is when you use Bloodthirst, damage is increased by 10% and the cooldown is reduced by 1 second for every 20% health the target is missing. So basically, if someone is half health, your Bloodthirst has no cooldown, and that's really, really fun. So, and if they're 75% health, 80% health, whatever, it's still reduced by 1 second, and it does more damage as well. So as your opponents get lower and lower health, you will deal more damage to them, and Bloodthirst will have a lower cooldown. Because Execute, as a Fury Warrior, costs a lot of rage, and Bloodthirst gives you rage. So if you can use Bloodthirst and have it deal almost similar damage to Execute when they're low health, that's the option that I'm going to take, especially when you think about your half health, your opponent's half health. You are in trouble. Your healer's in CC. Popping Enraged Regeneration, which makes you heal for an additional amount on Bloodthirst, it means you're gonna be able to heal yourself to full health. Because if they remain at half health, your opponent does. You can spam Bloodthirst like infinitely and heal yourself to full and heal yourself through a lot of damage, especially if you're able to get a charge and then Bloodthirst. It's just tons of healing. A really, really safe talent. A talent that I pretty much use all the time. Although one that does interest me is Endless Rage. If you are not going to be taking any damage and you don't worry about the low health effect, Endless Rage could actually be really, really nice by keeping your Enrage up pretty much always. As long as you have uptime, your Enrage will be up. As long as you can use Raging Blow, you can keep your Enrage rolling. Really, really cool talent. Something to experiment with. But I think that both the offensive and defensive utility of Slaughterhouse outweighs the potential of staying enraged. And also you have to think of the opportunity cost of what you're losing by not taking Slaughterhouse for Endless Rage. So once again, Endless Rage could be really, really good. Somebody could prove me wrong. The talent did get nerfed, so Blizzard obviously thought it was kind of strong. But I still think Slaughterhouse brings way too much to the table to not use consistently. So once again, I said I was going to try to go over these things quickly. But I love to talk about talents, and I love to talk about the way they can be useful. But I hope that I broke it down in a way that makes sense to you guys, gives you an ideas of the two general specs that I choose, and then of course the sort of flex talents that I go between depending on what comps I'm fighting. Like this block of talents right here. Whether I'm fighting melee, go for sparring, disarm, master, and commander. If I'm fighting casters, maybe you go reinforced armor, death sentence, spell reflect, that sort of thing. Or some mix of the two. Like if you're fighting warrior mage, reinforced armor, disarm, spell reflection might be a good call. So just keep those sort of things in mind. Make talent choices depending on what you're fighting and how you want to play. But those are basically what I tend to use depending on what I'm fighting against. Okay, so in terms of macros, instead of going over all of my macros that probably aren't necessary for you to look at, I'm going to show you pretty much like maybe one or two that will teach you how to write macros and at least give you the idea of how I'm using these to set up my character. So basically the only one that you really need is putting it together a lot of your cooldowns into one macro so that you can pop things like Battle Cry, Avatar, and whatever else you want to do. Those are the main ones. I mean, you can even pop them separately. I think that's even a good idea, so you can sometimes use Avatar just to get out of roots, things like that. But this is one macro that you might want, because I know that you guys will be asking about macros, which is fine. But I think in Legion, macros are definitely not as big of a deal, and most of my macros now are just to do things like put my cooldowns together. Like, really all you need is just like a macro that says show tooltip battlecry, /cast battlecry, /cast avatar. All this other stuff is either for BGs or just other stuff that I'm messing around with for world content as well. But for PvP, that's pretty much all you need. You don't even really need that macro, honestly. Other things that you might want to learn how to do are things like focus macros, but pretty much all focus macros read a very similar way, ignoring the cancel or a bladestorm part, which you can use, by the way. This is a line that you can put in any macro to stop bladestorming and then allow you to do whatever else you want to do, like pummel your focus target. Anyway, all focus macros are going to look very similar, and there's multiple ways of writing them. The way I write them nowadays is /cast target equals focus pummel, or /cast target equals focus stormbolt, or /cast target equals focus charge. Same thing, intimidating shout, and that will charge and fear your opponent. This will charge your focus target, that is, and fear your focus target. This will stormbolt your focus target. This will pummel your focus target, and all those work the exact same way. And those are pretty much the basics for the macros that I use now. I do have a macro that will charge and then bloodthirst in one button, which is kind of nice. I have macros that will do things like, this is like the main one, like I already said, Avatar, Battle Cry, Rampage, which when I'm on my target, it will pop all my cooldowns and rampage them instantly. So it's going to do a lot of damage, and we'll use this sort of thing when we're talking about rotation here in a moment. But for better or for worse, I feel like macros are not as big of a part of WoW as they may have been in the past. But once you learn to write the basics, then you can make macros to suit your playstyle and suit what you need to do. So now that we have pretty much all of your talents, macros, everything that you could want set up, now we can talk about the way that you deal damage as a Fury Warrior. So we talk about the basic rotations. You're going to charge in, Bloodthirst, Raging Blow. If you can cleave, go ahead and Whirlwind. If you can't cleave, go ahead and Furious Slash until you have Bloodthirst and Raging Blow back up, and then once you get this maximum rage situation, you're gonna Rampage and Raging Blow right after. And that's gonna be like your basic rotation as a Fury Warrior, pretty much throughout the course of your DPS rotation. Get to 100 Rage, Rampage, Raging Blow, repeat. Now when we have cooldowns up, that's gonna be a little bit of a different story. Anytime you have cooldowns, if you want to do like maximum damage in BGs, throw a little Whirlwind in the mix first to make sure that your Rampage and everything cleaves. In Arena, if you don't want to AoE, then just go ahead and don't Whirlwind. But the way that the burst is going to look like for me is, remember that macro that I showed you? That's Battlecry, Avatar, and Rampage. My favorite way to use that is to get a situation where you have 100 Rage, Rampage, Raging Blow, pop your macro, Rampage, Odin's Fury, Artifact Weapon, and then Raging Blow right after that. So that's going to do a pretty significant amount of chops to a single target, and then probably does a little bit of cleave as well. So if you have a member of your team like a Hunter who is just trapped an opponent, probably don't want to just instantly Odin's Fury right into that trap and break it. But you also have the option of stepping back to make sure that the radius of Odin's Fury only hits one target. So, but that's pretty much what that's going to look like. So once again, you'll notice that I've been chosen as Odin's champion, and I have my Trinket Convergence of Fates, making my cooldown come back up faster. So once again, once you get to 100 Rage, every time, Rampage, Raging Blow, Bloodthirst. It's a great combo. But when you have cooldowns, if you have to pop them on demand, go for it. But I think it's just nice to get a double Rampage situation. So double Rampage, Raging Blow, Coolies, Odin's Fury, Raging Blow, Bloodthirst. That's a situation that I like. If you can get an extra Rampage, Raging Blow in there first, that's so much damage. But that's the basic rotation for a Fury Warrior. It's a pretty darn fun rotation, honestly. In PvP, I really enjoy it. And the burst damage on demand is a lot of fun. And it's just not a complicated rotation, but pooling 100 Rage, Rampaging, Raging Blow, Bloodthirst out of that. It's a lot of fun for me. So that's the basic rotation for that. And next up, I would like to talk about where Fury fits in terms of arena compositions, because Fury is a class that is pretty freaking cool, but probably needs certain setups to be maximally effective. So in terms of Fury in 3v3, there's a couple little mental checks you could do to see if Fury is a good option over ARMS in that matchup. So the first sort of mental check you're going to do is, does my comp have a Mortal Strike without me providing it? For example, like Warrior Hunter Healer, KFC, is a comp that I really enjoy because a Hunter brings a Mortal Strike to the team, but also it satisfies the second mental check, which is this comp focused on burst? I think that's one of the things that Fury Warriors do best, is in those situations where you already have a Mortal Strike and your comp is focused on burst, Fury excels. So given those two criteria of Mortal Strike provided externally by another member of your team and a comp being based on burst, you can sort of begin to imagine some compositions where Fury would do well. The first one is my favorite one, KFC, Hunter Warrior Healer. The Hunter is able to provide Mortal Strike through their pet, and your comp is definitely based on burst in CC windows. A lot of times it's going to look like you setting up some sort of CC for your Hunter, where it's Fear into Trap or Stormbolt into Trap, and then popping your cooldowns within that CC window and forcing enemy cooldowns or killing them in that burst. Fury's really good in that situation. Another composition that I haven't actually played, but I've heard is definitely good, is Windwalker Monk Fury Warrior. Another situation where Windwalker Monks provide Mortal Strike and definitely bring the burst. Windwalker Monks, they deal somewhat consistent damage, but burst is definitely the name of the game for them. Same thing with Fury Warrior. So that's a composition that you could play as well. But then there are also some compositions that don't necessarily fit every criteria, but still can work. For example, Fury Warrior, Arcane Mage, Healer is another situation where Arcane Mages don't provide Mortal Strike, but they do so much burst, it doesn't matter. And Fury Warrior plus Arcane Mage cooldowns, especially when somebody is CC'd, can, once again, either force cooldowns or just wipe them off the map. Same situation with Turbo Cleave, Enhancement Shaman, Fury Warrior Healer. A lot of times Turbo Cleave is played with an Arms Warrior, which gives it kind of more of that consistent damage with, punctuated by burst windows. However, Fury Warrior and Enhancement Shaman can also just wipe people off the map if you get enough DPS rolling. So, once again, even in situations where Fury isn't going to be like the best choice, or you're not going to have a tier 1 comp. If you want to play a Fury Warrior and you want to team up with some of your friends, definitely by all means have fun with that. Just understand what Fury does well and maybe change your playstyle around that. So understand that you want to set up burst windows, and that's when you're going to force the most cooldowns out of the team or in the game. And what that CC and burst might look like is, for example, maybe this is the healer. You'll charge in Fear the healer. You're going to leap in, stun the DPS that you want to kill, pop your cooldowns, Rampage, Odin's Fury, Raging Blow, Bloodthirst. The fear is ending, and your opponent is dead. So that's kind of the idea. You can also obviously just fear, pop cooldowns, and then chuck a Stormblood as the fear is ending. You have a lot of different options as a Fury Warrior, but basically, just like anything else, you're going to want to set up your damage in burst windows and be maximally effective within that window. So Fury Warrior is a really fun class for me. Probably I like it even better than ARMS right now, but I'd still want to talk about ARMS perhaps in another video, since this one is getting to be a little bit longer. But you guys do know how my guides are. I try to be thorough for you guys. I try to think of things that might, questions you might have, things that might be helpful to you, and then provide that information for you as best as I can. But hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully it was helpful. Thanks for watching, and have fun kicking ass on your Fury Warrior, guys. We'll see you guys next time. Peace!